Before cable channels existed to fill endless hours with content, the three major networks discovered something magical: the made-for-TV movie. These weren't theatrical leftovers or cheap knockoffs. They were purpose-built television events that could stop the nation cold for 2 hours on a Tuesday night. The 1970s perfected this art form, creating cult classics that still haunt midnight movie marathons and streaming recommendations 50 years later. Number 20. The Night Gallery, 1969, aired throughout 1970s. Premise: Rod Serling's anthology horror series featuring supernatural paintings that serve as doorways to terrifying tales. Rod Serling's follow-up to The Twilight Zone premiered as a TV movie pilot before spawning the anthology series that would define 1970s television horror. The concept was deceptively simple. Each episode began with Serling walking through a spooky gallery, introducing paintings that illustrated the supernatural stories to follow. What made it legendary was the sheer quality of nightmare fuel delivered weekly to suburban living rooms. The pilot movie aired November 8, 1969, but the series dominated early 1970s television with stories that were darker and more explicitly horrifying than anything Serling had attempted in The Twilight Zone. Where Twilight Zone relied on ironic twists and social commentary, Night Gallery went straight for the jugular with genuine scares featuring vengeful spirits, cursed objects, and cosmic horror that wouldn't look out of place in a Stephen King novel. The production attracted serious Hollywood talent despite being just television. Joan Crawford appeared in her final role, and young directors like Steven Spielberg cut their teeth on anthology segments. The series ran until 1973, but lived on in syndication throughout the decade, introducing new generations to sophisticated supernatural storytelling that treated television audiences like intelligent adults capable of handling genuine scares. What elevated Night Gallery to cult status was Serling's commitment to treating horror as legitimate drama, rather than cheap thrills. Episodes dealt with themes of mortality, guilt, and cosmic insignificance that resonated with viewers experiencing the cultural upheaval of the early 1970s. The show proved that television could be genuinely frightening without resorting to gore or exploitation tactics. The People, 1972. Premise: telepathic aliens living secretly among humans in a small desert community are discovered by a school teacher. Based on Zena Henderson's beloved science fiction stories, this CBS TV movie explored themes of acceptance and otherness through the lens of gentle alien refugees hiding their powers from fearful humans. Kim Darby starred as the teacher who discovers her students possess extraordinary abilities, while William Shatner played the government agent investigating mysterious occurrences in the isolated desert town. The film aired January 22, 1972, and immediately gained a devoted following among science fiction fans who appreciated its emphasis on character development over special effects. Unlike most alien invasion stories, The People portrayed extraterrestrials as peaceful refugees, seeking only to live quietly among humans while practicing their telepathic and telekinetic abilities in secret. What made the movie cult-worthy was its sophisticated exploration of prejudice and fear of the different. The People were clearly metaphors for any marginalized group seeking acceptance in mainstream society, and the film's sympathetic portrayal of their struggles resonated with viewers during an era of civil rights activism and social change. The production values were modest, even by 1970s television standards, but the emotional authenticity of the performances elevated the material above typical sci-fi fare. Henderson's source stories had been popular in science fiction magazines for decades, and the adaptation captured the gentle humanism that made her work beloved by readers who preferred character-driven narratives to space opera adventures. Chapter 18. Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, 1973. Premise: a young woman inherits an old mansion and accidentally releases malevolent creatures living in the basement. This ABC TV movie terrified an entire generation of children and established itself as the gold standard for television horror. Kim Darby starred as Sally Farnham, who uncovers a sealed fireplace in her inherited Victorian mansion and unleashes diminutive demons that proceed to torment her with psychological warfare designed to drive her insane. The film premiered October 10, 1973, during the height of the decade's occult horror boom, but distinguished itself from theatrical counterparts through its reliance on suggestion and atmosphere rather than graphic violence. The creatures, realized through a combination of practical effects and genuinely creepy voice work, represented childhood fears of things hiding in dark places, amplified into adult nightmares. Director John Newland, a veteran of supernatural anthology television, understood that television's intimate viewing environment made subtlety more effective than spectacle. The creatures' whispered threats and barely glimpsed movements created an atmosphere of paranoid dread that stayed with viewers long after the movie ended. The film's cult status grew through repeated television airings throughout the 1970s and 1980s, introducing new generations to its particular brand of domestic horror. Many fans cite it as their introduction to genuine fear, and its influence can be seen in later films that explore the concept of home invasion by supernatural forces. Number 17. The Quester Tapes, 1974. Premise: an android with human emotions searches for his missing creator while evading government agents. Gene Roddenberry's post-Star Trek project attempted to create a more thoughtful approach to artificial intelligence on television. Robert Foxworth starred as Quester, an android who awakens with incomplete programming and sets out to find his creator while learning what it means to be human. Mike Farrell played his human companion, a scientist who helps Quester navigate a world that fears what it doesn't understand. The TV movie aired January 23, 1974, as a pilot for a proposed series that never materialized due to network interference with Roddenberry's vision. NBC executives wanted more action and less philosophical exploration, leading to creative conflicts that ultimately killed the project despite positive audience response to the pilot. What made Quester cult-worthy was its sophisticated exploration of consciousness, emotion, and identity, themes that wouldn't become mainstream in science fiction television until Star Trek: The Next Generation introduced Data decades later. Foxworth's performance balanced android precision with emerging humanity in ways that made Quester both alien and deeply relatable. The production featured the high-concept storytelling that made Roddenberry famous, combined with character development that elevated the material above typical robot run-amok scenarios. Quester's quest to understand human behavior while possessing superior physical and intellectual capabilities created dramatic tensions that anticipated later AI narratives in film and television. Number 16. Go Ask Alice, 1973. Premise: anonymous teenage drug. Users' descent into addiction and prostitution, told through diary entries. Based on the controversial book supposedly based on a real teenager's diary, this ABC TV movie became a cultural phenomenon that sparked national conversations about drug education and teenage rebellion. Jamie Smith Jackson starred as the anonymous protagonist whose experimentation with LSD leads to a horrific spiral of addiction, sexual exploitation, and psychological breakdown. The film premiered January 24, 1973, during the height of America's drug panic, when parents were terrified that their suburban children might be experimenting with psychedelic substances. The movie's unflinching portrayal of drug culture's dark side made it both educational tool and exploitation entertainment, depending on the viewer's perspective. What elevated Go Ask Alice above typical after-school special material was its commitment to psychological realism in depicting addiction's progressive stages. The film avoided preachy messaging in favor of showing addiction's practical consequences, lost relationships, criminal behavior, and complete personality disintegration. The movie's cult status grew through decades of classroom screenings and late-night television broadcasts, making it a shared cultural touchstone for multiple generations. Its influence extended beyond television into drug education programs, though later scholarship questioned the authenticity of the source diary. Number 15. The Legend of Lizzie Bordon, 1975. Premise: psychological drama exploring the motivations behind the infamous axe murders in 1892 Fall River. Elizabeth Montgomery's career-defining performance as Lizzie Bordon transformed the former bewitched star into a serious dramatic actress while exploring one of America's most notorious unsolved crimes. The CBS TV movie presented multiple theories about Bordon's guilt or innocence while creating a psychological portrait of a woman trapped by Victorian society's restrictions. The film aired February 10, 1975, and immediately generated controversy for its sympathetic portrayal of Bordon as a frustrated spinster driven to violence by family abuse and social oppression. Montgomery's performance suggested that the murders might have been justified responses to intolerable domestic conditions rather than acts of random violence. Director Paul Wenkos created an atmosphere of claustrophobic domesticity that made the Bordon household feel like a pressure cooker ready to explode. The film's exploration of 19th century gender roles and family dynamics resonated with 1970s audiences experiencing their own challenges to traditional authority structures. The movie became a cult classic through its willingness to present Lizzie as a complex character rather than a simple monster or victim. Montgomery's nuanced performance suggested depths of rage and intelligence that made Bordon simultaneously sympathetic and terrifying, creating a psychological puzzle that viewers continued debating decades later. Number 14. Colchack, the Night Stalker, 1972. Premise: investigative reporter battles a modern vampire in Las Vegas while bureaucratic authorities try to cover up supernatural crimes. This ABC TV movie launched one of television's most beloved horror characters while establishing the template for supernatural procedural shows that wouldn't become mainstream until The X-Files. Darren McGavin starred as Carl Colchack, a rumpled reporter who discovers that a series of Las Vegas murders are being committed by an actual vampire, despite police and government officials' attempts to find rational explanations. The film premiered January 11, 1972, and became the highest-rated TV movie in history at that time, proving that audiences were hungry for sophisticated horror that treated supernatural threats as genuine rather than explained-away mysteries. Richard Matheson's script perfectly balanced humor and genuine scares while creating a hero who was neither action star nor brilliant detective, just a persistent journalist following leads wherever they led. What made Colchack legendary was McGavin's performance as an everyman hero who approached supernatural threats with sardonic humor and professional determination. Unlike typical horror protagonists, Colchack never became jaded or cynical about encountering monsters. He remained genuinely curious about unexplained phenomena while maintaining healthy skepticism about official explanations. The movie spawned a sequel, The Night Strangler, and a weekly series that ran for one season, but the original film remained the gold standard for supernatural television. Its influence can be seen in every subsequent show that featured investigators dealing with unexplained phenomena, from The X-Files to Supernatural. Number 13. Bad Ronald, 1974 premise. Teenager accidentally kills a girl and hides in a secret room built by his mother, gradually becoming a dangerous psychopath. This ABC TV movie explored themes of isolation, family dysfunction, and mental illness through the story of Ronald Wilby, a socially awkward teenager who becomes increasingly unhinged while hiding from authorities in a concealed room in his family home. Scott Jacoby delivered a chilling performance as Ronald, whose mother's misguided protection turns him into a genuine threat to the family that eventually buys their house. The film aired October 23, 1974, and immediately became a cult sensation among viewers who appreciated its psychological complexity and willingness to explore uncomfortable themes about family loyalty and mental health. Unlike typical TV movies that offered clear moral lessons, Bad Ronald presented a scenario where love and protection become enablers of dangerous behavior. Director Buzz Kulik created an atmosphere of mounting dread that transformed a suburban home into a psychological prison. Ronald's gradual transformation from awkward teenager to potential killer was portrayed with enough sympathy to make viewers question their own moral assumptions about family obligations and social responsibility. The movie's cult status grew through late-night television broadcasts that introduced new generations to its particular brand of domestic horror. Its exploration of themes like social isolation and family dysfunction felt increasingly relevant as American society became more fragmented and individualistic. Number 12. The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, 1974. Premise: 100-year-old former slave recounts her life from the Civil War through the Civil Rights Movement. Cicely Tyson's Emmy-winning performance as Jane Pittman created one of television's most powerful historical dramas while proving that TV movies could tackle serious social issues without sacrificing entertainment value. The CBS film adapted Ernest J. Gaines's novel as an epic journey through American history, as seen through the eyes of a woman who experienced slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and the early Civil Rights Movement. The film premiered January 31st, 1974, during Black History Month, and immediately became a cultural phenomenon that sparked national conversations about race, history, and the legacy of slavery. Tyson's transformation from young slave to elderly matriarch was achieved through masterful makeup and prosthetics that aged her character realistically across decades of historical change. What made the movie legendary was its refusal to present history as distant past or abstract concept. Jane Pittman's personal experiences made historical events immediate and emotional, while Tyson's performance created a character who embodied both individual strength and collective African-American experience. The production featured meticulous attention to historical detail and period authenticity that elevated it above typical biographical drama. The film's influence extended beyond entertainment into educational settings, where it became a standard tool for teaching American history from perspectives traditionally excluded from mainstream narratives. Number 11. The Execution of Private Slovic, 1974. Premise: the only American soldier executed for desertion during World War II becomes a symbol of individual conscience versus military authority. Martin Sheen starred as Eddie Slovic, the factory worker turned reluctant soldier who became the first American executed for desertion since the Civil War. The NBC TV movie examined the circumstances that led to Slovic's death while questioning the military justice system's treatment of psychological casualties during wartime. The film aired March 13, 1974, during the final stages of American involvement in Vietnam, when questions about military authority and individual conscience were particularly relevant to contemporary audiences. Sheen's performance portrayed Slovic as neither hero nor coward, but as an ordinary man overwhelmed by circumstances beyond his control. Director Lamont Johnson avoided taking obvious political stances while creating a character study that explored themes of class, justice, and institutional power. The film's examination of how military bureaucracy processed individual cases made larger points about institutional indifference to human complexity without resorting to heavy-handed messaging. The movie became a cult classic among viewers who appreciated its moral complexity and refusal to provide easy answers about wartime justice. Its influence extended into discussions about military policy and individual rights during times of national crisis. Shan Tin, Gargoyles, 1972. Premise: anthropologist and his daughter discover ancient winged creatures awakening in the New Mexico desert. This CBS TV movie combined creature feature thrills with serious science fiction themes while creating some of the most memorable monster designs in television history. Cornell Wilde starred as Dr. Mercer Bowley, who investigates reports of strange sightings and discovers that medieval legends about gargoyles were based on encounters with real creatures that hibernate for centuries between active periods. The film premiered November 21, 1972, and immediately gained cult status among monster movie fans who appreciated its commitment to practical effects and makeup artistry. The gargoyle costumes, designed by Stan Winston in his first major television work, created creatures that were genuinely alien yet recognizably connected to medieval artistic traditions. What elevated Gargoyles above typical monster movies was its thoughtful exploration of evolutionary themes and human-creature coexistence. The script suggested that gargoyles represented an alternative evolutionary path that challenged human assumptions about dominance and survival, creating philosophical depth unusual in creature features. The production balanced genuine scares with family-friendly adventure, making it accessible to younger viewers while satisfying adult audiences seeking more sophisticated monster movie entertainment. Its influence can be seen in later films and television shows that featured practical creature effects and evolutionary horror themes. Pjoktutspromerd 9. The California Kid, 1974. Premise: hot rod driver seeks revenge against a corrupt sheriff who murdered his brother using his patrol car as a weapon. Martin Sheen starred as Michael McCord, whose brother becomes the latest victim of Sheriff Roy Childress, Vic Morrow, a psychotic lawman who uses his position to murder speeders by forcing them off mountain roads. The ABC TV movie combined car chase thrills with vigilante justice themes while exploring corruption in small-town America. The film aired September 25, 1974, during the height of the outlaw road movie genre, popularized by films like Vanishing Point and Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry. The TV movie's lower budget forced creative solutions that emphasized character development and psychological tension over expensive action sequences. What made The California Kid cult-worthy was its willingness to present law enforcement as genuinely corrupt and dangerous rather than simply misguided or incompetent. Morrow's performance as Sheriff Childress created a villain who used his badge to indulge sadistic impulses while maintaining the appearance of civic responsibility. The movie's exploration of themes like justice, revenge, and abuse of authority resonated with audiences experiencing post-Watergate disillusionment with institutional power. Its combination of action thrills and social commentary influenced later films and television shows that featured corrupt authority figures as primary antagonists. Water 8. The Night Strangler, 1973. Premise: Colchack investigates a series of murders in Seattle committed by an immortal alchemist who needs human blood to survive. The sequel to The Night Stalker proved that Darren McGavin's Carl Colchack could sustain multiple supernatural investigations while maintaining the character's essential charm and humor. Richard Matheson returned to write another script that balanced genuine scares with satirical commentary on bureaucratic incompetence and media sensationalism. The film premiered January 16, 1973, and achieved ratings nearly as high as its predecessor, while expanding the Colchack mythology in directions that would influence the subsequent television series. The Seattle setting provided a perfect backdrop for stories about hidden history and underground secrets, while the immortal antagonist raised questions about the costs of eternal life. What distinguished The Night Strangler from typical sequel fare was its willingness to deepen Colchack's character while exploring new varieties of supernatural threat. The film's antagonist was more sympathetic than the vampire from the first movie, creating moral complexity that elevated the material above simple monster hunting adventure. McGavin's performance remained the series' greatest asset, creating a character who approached supernatural mysteries with professional curiosity rather than heroic bravado. His Colchack was neither brave nor cowardly, but simply persistent in pursuing stories that others preferred to ignore or explain away. Number 7. Trilogy of Terror, 1975. Premise: 3 horror stories starring Karen Black, including the legendary Zuni fetish doll that terrorizes a woman in her apartment. Dan Curtis's anthology film showcased Karen Black in 3 different roles while delivering some of television's most memorable horror imagery. The third segment, Amelia, featured Black being stalked by a possessed Zuni hunting fetish doll that became one of the most iconic monsters in TV movie history. The film premiered March 4, 1975, and immediately became a cultural phenomenon thanks to the Zuni doll sequence, which generated genuine scares despite its absurd premise. Black's solo performance against the puppet antagonist created an atmosphere of claustrophobic terror that transformed a simple apartment into a supernatural battleground. What made Trilogy of Terror legendary was its commitment to psychological horror over gore or special effects. Each segment explored different varieties of fear, possession, manipulation, and supernatural pursuit, while showcasing Black's range as a dramatic actress willing to embrace genuinely challenging material. The Zuni doll became a cultural icon that influenced countless later horror films and television shows featuring killer toys or possessed objects. Its combination of practical puppetry and sound design created a monster that remained terrifying despite technological limitations. Number 6. The Strange Possession of Mrs. Oliver, 1977. Premise: housewife becomes possessed by the spirit of a murder victim seeking justice for her death. Karen Black starred as Helen Oliver, whose life is disrupted when she becomes the vessel for a vengeful spirit seeking to expose her own murder. The NBC TV movie explored themes of justice, identity, and supernatural intervention while creating a psychological thriller that questioned the boundaries between life and death. The film premiered February 28, 1977, during the height of 1970s interest in occult phenomena and supernatural explanations for unexplained events. Black's dual performance as both possessed woman and possessing spirit created dramatic opportunities that showcased her abilities as a character actress willing to embrace challenging material. What elevated the movie above typical possession stories was its focus on the victim's perspective rather than the possessed person's suffering. The spirit's quest for justice provided moral complexity that made supernatural intervention seem like necessary correction for human institutional failures. The production featured sophisticated psychological exploration of identity and consciousness that treated possession as metaphor for women's struggle to be heard and believed. Its influence can be seen in later films and television shows that used supernatural elements to explore social justice themes. 5. A Cold Night's Death, 1973. Premise: 2 scientists isolated in an Arctic research station are terrorized by an unknown presence that may not be human. Robert Culp and Eli Wallach starred as researchers who discover that their remote weather station harbors a malevolent intelligence that seems determined to drive them insane or kill them. The ABC TV movie created an atmosphere of mounting paranoia and claustrophobic terror while exploring themes of isolation and scientific hubris. The film premiered January 30th, 1973, and immediately gained recognition as one of television's most effective horror films through its reliance on psychological tension rather than monster effects. The two-character structure forced dramatic focus onto the relationship between the scientists as their situation becomes increasingly desperate. What made A Cold Night's Death cult-worthy was its commitment to ambiguity about the nature of the threat. The film suggested multiple explanations: supernatural presence, scientific experiment gone wrong, or simple isolation-induced madness, without providing definitive answers that would reduce the mystery to simple solutions. The Arctic setting provided perfect isolation for psychological horror, while the scientific context added intellectual credibility to supernatural themes. Its influence can be seen in later films that used remote locations and minimal casts to create maximum psychological impact. The number 4, Don't Go to Sleep, 1982. Premise: family moves into a new home where their dead daughter's spirit manipulates her surviving sister into acts of violence. While technically from 1982, this ABC TV movie belongs to the 1970s tradition of supernatural family horror that defined the decade's television scares. Ruth Gordon starred as the grandmother who recognizes supernatural threats that the parents refuse to acknowledge, while young Kristen Cumming delivered a chilling performance as the surviving daughter influenced by her dead sister's vengeful spirit. The film explores themes of grief, guilt, and family dysfunction through supernatural horror that makes the dead sister both victim and antagonist. The movie's willingness to feature child characters in genuinely threatening situations elevated it above typical TV movie material while creating genuine scares for adult audiences. What made Don't Go to Sleep memorable was its sophisticated exploration of family trauma and the ways grief can manifest as supernatural threat. The dead daughter's influence over her living sister created psychological complexity that transformed standard haunted house formula into genuine family drama. The production featured practical effects and atmospheric cinematography that created an effective supernatural threat without relying on gore or exploitation elements. Its influence extended into later supernatural family dramas that explored similar themes of childhood trauma and sibling relationships. Salems Lot, 1979. Premise: small Maine town becomes infested with vampires when an ancient evil takes residence in the local haunted house. Tobe Hooper's adaptation of Stephen King's novel became the gold standard for television horror, while proving that TV movies could deliver genuine scares without theatrical budgets or R-rated content. David Soul starred as Ben Mears, the writer who returns to his hometown and discovers that residents are being transformed into vampires by an ancient evil that has taken up residence in the notorious Marston house. The miniseries premiered November 17, 1979, and immediately became a cultural phenomenon that influenced horror television for decades. James Mason's performance as Straker, the vampire's human servant, created one of television's most memorable villains, while the floating vampire boy outside the bedroom window became an iconic image that traumatized an entire generation of viewers. What elevated Salem's Lot above typical vampire stories was its emphasis on community decay and social isolation as preconditions for supernatural invasion. The town's willingness to ignore obvious signs of supernatural threat reflected broader themes about American social fragmentation and institutional failure during the late 1970s. Hooper's direction created an atmosphere of mounting dread that transformed familiar small-town settings into landscapes of supernatural terror. The miniseries format allowed for character development and community world-building that gave emotional weight to the supernatural threats, making viewers genuinely care about the town's fate. Number 2. Brian's Song, 1971. Premise: the friendship between Chicago Bears teammates, Gale Sayers and Brian Piccolo, focusing on their bond as Piccolo battles terminal cancer. James Caan and Billy D. Williams delivered career-defining performances in this ABC Movie of the Week that redefined what television movies could accomplish emotionally and artistically. The film chronicled the real-life friendship between the two NFL players, becoming the first major television drama to deal seriously with interracial friendship while avoiding sentimentality or political messaging. The movie premiered November 30th, 1971, and became the most-watched TV movie in history at the time, proving that audiences were hungry for intelligent adult drama that dealt with real human relationships. William Blynn's Emmy-winning script avoided sports movie cliches while creating genuine emotional investment in both characters' professional and personal lives. What made Brian's song legendary was its refusal to use Piccolo's illness for cheap emotional manipulation. The film earned its tears through authentic character development and genuine friendship dynamics that transcended racial boundaries without making race relations the central focus of the story. The production featured Michel Legrand's memorable musical score, particularly the theme song "The Hands of Time," which became a popular standard and helped establish the emotional tone that elevated the material above typical sports biography. The film's influence extended beyond television into popular culture, where it became shorthand for male friendship and emotional honesty. Chapter 1. Duel, 1971. Premise: business commuter becomes the target of a psychotic truck driver in a deadly game of cat and mouse on isolated desert highways. Steven Spielberg's featured directorial debut transformed a simple Richard Matheson short story into the most influential TV movie ever made, launching one of cinema's greatest careers while creating a template for vehicular terror that influenced countless subsequent films. Dennis Weaver starred as David Mann, whose routine business trip becomes a nightmare when he inadvertently offends an unseen truck driver who begins stalking him with homicidal intent. The film premiered November 13, 1971, as part of ABC's Movie of the Week series, and immediately established Spielberg as a major directorial talent while proving that television could deliver theatrical quality thrills. The simple premise, man versus truck on empty highways, became a masterclass in pure cinematic storytelling that relied on visual narrative rather than dialogue or complex plotting. What made Duel transcendent was Spielberg's understanding that the truck itself, not its unseen driver, was the true antagonist. The film transformed automotive technology into a primal threat while exploring themes of masculinity, aggression, and technological alienation that resonated with audiences experiencing rapid social change. The production's modest television budget forced creative solutions that became stylistic strengths. Spielberg's use of point-of-view shots, practical effects, and desert locations created an atmosphere of mounting terror that proved more effective than expensive special effects or elaborate action sequences. Duel's influence extended far beyond television into theatrical filmmaking, where its template of ordinary people facing extraordinary threats became Spielberg's signature approach. The film's success led directly to Jaws and subsequently to Spielberg's dominance of Hollywood blockbuster filmmaking, making it arguably the most consequential TV movie ever produced. These 20 TV movies proved that television could deliver genuine thrills, authentic emotion, and lasting cultural impact without theatrical budgets or star power. They created a golden age of made-for-TV entertainment that transformed Tuesday nights into appointment viewing for millions of Americans seeking sophisticated drama in their living rooms. Drop a comment. Which of these forgotten TV movie legends deserves the streaming revival treatment? Did we overlook your favorite late-night television terror from the decade of shag carpets and wood paneling? And here's the question that'll keep you up past midnight. If these TV movies could terrify and move audiences with practical effects, minimal budgets, and network television standards, what does that say about our current entertainment landscape, where unlimited resources often produce forgettable content? Sometimes the greatest magic happens when creators are forced to rely on pure storytelling instead of spectacle.